The Subcommittee on Africa will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to explore the developments following the historic signing of the Washington Accords between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. My engagement in supporting peace between Rwanda and DRC spans more than 3 decades, from a focus on the immediate aftermath of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. We even had hearings here with people because, unfortunately, the international community utterly failed, especially Kofi Annan, who was the head of security. He got the General Dallaire memo about what was about to happen in Rwanda, and nothing was done, and we had people testify on that. So it's been a long-standing concern. It's been bipartisan, so I'm happy that we're having this hearing today. We are working, of course, on trying to see faithful implementation of the Washington Accords for peace and prosperity. This skillfully and brilliantly brokered peace deal signified a new era in the region, one where peace through strength is brought to bear to end the lengthy, bloody, and costly conflict. Bringing both parties to negotiate at the same table was historic in and of itself. The first time in modern history where such progress has been made on this conflict. The deals agreed to will secure extraordinary benefits, if faithfully implemented, for the DRC, for Rwanda, and for the United States. Ensuring that all sides follow through on the commitments made at the signing in December is not only in the U.S. national interest, but most importantly, really, for the millions of people who suffer in the war, for future generations of Congolese and Rwandan children, and for the memory of the 6 million dead from this decades-long conflict, a human toll that is both staggering and intolerable. Over the course of the last several years, I've chaired 11 hearings that have focused exclusively on the political crisis and violence in the DRC and Rwanda. Regrettably, each hearing has revealed that the international community and the U.S. response has been half-hearted and perhaps even indifferent, especially in the face of such violence, tragedy, and suffering. Today, things are changing. And under President Trump and his cabinet's leadership in the response is strong, sustained, and I believe it will be durable. I believe that the signing of the Washington Accords in such a public way, just down a few blocks, and I was there for that, along with Chairman Mast and others, it brings gravity to the commitments of the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda. And this hearing today is a message about the seriousness this committee, this full committee, of course, there's great care there, and of course, and the full Congress, House and Senate, to those commitments. We're committed. We want faithful implementation. It's an appeal to both sides. Please faithfully implement this deal. In December of last year, I said I look forward to working on and watching the peace process unfold and ensure that the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda are honoring the terms of the agreement. That is why we've called this hearing today, because there continue to be spoilers to the peace process, belligerents who act to undermine and embarrass the United States, and I would say, even more importantly, themselves. You know, if you sign, you say, this is I put my honor and my full faith towards this agreement, you gotta follow through. The benefits of the Washington Accords, as I said before, are just extraordinary, and everyone wins when this is implemented faithfully. The incentives are spelled out clearly in the Regional Economic Integration Framework, mandated that the DRC and Rwanda develop a structured roadmap for economic integration, covering mineral supply chains, infrastructure, energy, tourism, and other sectors, to underpin peace with shared prosperity and to attract investment. Whereas the Strategic Partnership Agreement between the U.S. and each of the African governments, DRC and separately Rwanda, builds on the Regional Economic Integration Framework into a wider trilateral framework that links economic reforms, critical minerals governance, and security cooperation to the U.S. strategic interests and investment commitments. This includes addressing child and forced labor issues in the mining industry through the full supply chain transparency, quote unquote, due to the diligence, traceability, and adherence to internationally recognized standards to ensure responsible mining and sourcing, close quote. Very critical is that the Washington Accords include a 4-phase concept of operations that both parties agreed to, and that is essential for Rwanda agreeing to pull its troops back, but only if the DRC follows a synchronized schedule to eliminate the FDLR militia. At a hearing of this subcommittee on May 5th of 1998, I noted that, quote, the RPF-led Rwandan government has used the guilt of the international community as a shield to prevent criticism of its actions in the DRC, and that the sheltering of the Hutu participants in the genocide has led to continuing problems in that country. Decades later, the root causes of the conflict continued to boil over. The presence of the FDLR and its genocidal ideology rightfully continues to be the government of Rwanda's primary national security concern in eastern Congo. But today, we have good reason to believe that known areas of the FDLR combatants are under M23 and Rwandan control. And I would expect to hear of the developments that describe the measures being taken by M23 in Rwanda to demobilize these actors. It is insufficient to say that M23 is an independent group or not party to the Washington Accords when there is a clear pattern of coordination by Kigali and the group. The Congolese army, too, has issues with the FDLR, including there's no clear-cut policy that relocates and disarms individuals who should be viewed as a threat to the Congolese commitments. In 2008, I visited Goma. Then the peacekeepers, unfortunately, were engaging in despicable behavior of raping little children. Ambassador Swing was in charge of that deployment. I held 4 hearings on it. We thought we got an agreement, a blue helmet policy that said zero tolerance. It was very, very slow in the implementation. And when the peacekeepers don't protect, who's left? And I was very, very upset with that, as were so many others on both sides of the aisle. The leaders, so Senator Rubio has been very specific, and I am grateful for this, about Hong Kong and mainland China's based companies accused of financing armed groups, including M23. These sanctions that have been imposed by the Trump administration include Congo Dongyang Mining Corporation, which is a facilitator accused of sourcing minerals from conflict zones and moving them through Rwandan supply chains to Chinese refineries. In 2023, I chaired a hearing and said, from cobalt to cars, the entire supply chain is built on violence. And we heard from several people who talked about how children were dying, who are working in artisanal mines, and others. They were forced. Chinese government I have a bill in that would try to stop it. It has not passed. Part of it passed on the over on the what do you call it, the Ways and Means Committee, but it still has not proceeded. Hopefully, what's happening now eclipses any need for anything like that, because this agreement is so comprehensive. We must break our dependence on minerals from that finance the Chinese Communist Party, as I said back in 2023, and that fuels the stability proffered by the CCP. The Washington Accords are more than minerals. It's a culminating event designed to end the suffering in the war. And I asked in December of 2012, can the inter-ethnic problems in the DRC and its neighbors finally be resolved so that a lasting peace can be achieved? Let me just point out, too, during the worst days, and it's back again, of the Darfur genocide, many people said, why isn't there any attention being brought to the killing fields in the DR Congo? We had Matt Affleck come in and testify, and so many others. Tony Hall, whose staff is here, he'll be testifying at our follow-up hearing to today. So many people spoke out and said, what about the DR Congo? And what about Rwanda? So the Accords, I think, answers that question very robustly. And again, Sarah, thank you for being here, and I'll introduce you formally in a moment. I'd like to yield to Sarah Jacobs, our distinguished ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very timely hearing. And Deputy Assistant Secretary Troutman, thank you for testifying before our committee today. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is facing an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, with 7.3 million internally displaced persons and over 7,000 killed in 2025 alone. More than 26 million people are experiencing life-threatening levels of acute food insecurity. It is one of the most complex and long-standing humanitarian crises in the world. While the latest escalation between DRC and Rwanda started in 2022, the conflict in eastern DRC has been ongoing for at least 3 decades. Civilians have suffered the most under this conflict, either being caught in the crossfire or being targeted by armed groups. conflict-related sexual violence have reached epidemic levels in eastern DRC. Cases have only escalated this year, while impunity for its perpetrators, including the M23 and other armed groups and military forces, prevails. So I do appreciate President Trump's high-level attention to this conflict that is too often ignored and put on the back burner. But this conflict and the people of DRC, they deserve sustained high-level attention and care, and not a fleeting concern that gets easily forgotten. And I would argue that the president's promises and statements that he has already ended the war between DRC and Rwanda ring hollow, when we are in fact not seeing peace or stability on the ground at all. I'm also concerned that the lack of consultation and inclusion of civil society and local communities is setting up the peace process to fail before it even gets off the ground. Only 5 days after the signing of the Washington Accords between President Tshisekedi and President Kagame, hosted by President Trump, the M23, co-located with the Rwandans along the front lines, took over the strategic city of Uvira in South Kivu. And while M23 has reportedly retreated partially from Uvira, we still have not seen the full retreat to 75 kilometers outside of Uvira back to Kamanyola, as the United States called for in December. And we are now receiving reports of reprisal attacks against the Banyamulenge, a Congolese Tutsi community, and other civilians accused of supporting the M23 by the Wazalendo and other armed bandits. This is on top of nearly a year of M23's occupation of Goma and Bukavu, two other extremely important cities in the Kivus, where civilians have faced atrocities, executions, and other abuses. Both parties have made commitments that they have failed to maintain. Rwanda clearly continues to support the M23 and deploy its own forces, the latest numbers ranging from 5,000 to 7,000 troops in eastern Congo, not including the latest Uvira offensive, in violation of the DRC's sovereignty. The DRC military, for its part, has reportedly continued a collaboration with the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, a militia founded by the leaders of the 1994 Rwanda genocide in contravention of the Accords. And despite Secretary Rubio's and Ambassador Waltz's promises a month ago that they would use the tools at our disposal to hold Rwanda accountable and, quote, ensure promises made by Rwanda to the president are kept, the administration has still not announced any new sanctions or accountability measures against Rwanda or the M23. To me, it's very clear. Rwanda needs to stop supporting the M23 and stop its own occupation of the DRC so the Congolese people can finally be on the path to peace. Not more war. So I urge the Trump administration to make good on its promises to hold Rwanda and other spoilers to peace accountable. And I look forward to hearing from Ms. Troutman on how the department plans to take these actions. I also urge the administration to actually include civil society in the peace process so that it has real buy-in with local populations on the various commercial deals in progress with the government of DRC to ensure any investments actually benefit the Congolese people, not just foreign companies and elites. And once again, I urge President Trump to finally name senior positions to lead Africa policy. A year into his term, the president has neglected to nominate an assistant secretary for the Bureau of African Affairs at the State Department. We are now on our third senior bureau official. And he has not only failed to appoint an NSC senior director for Africa, but he has actually combined the Africa and Middle East Directorate. I understand Senior Advisor Boulos is taking the lead on this portfolio. But he is not Senate confirmed, and he is also apparently in charge of the U.S. response in Sudan, Libya, and Yemen. So I'm concerned that he's unable to dedicate the necessary time that the Congolese people deserve. I also urge the Trump administration to reverse its devastating cuts to foreign assistance in the country. Earlier this year, Secretary Rubio cut hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance to the DRC as part of President Trump's sham foreign assistance review and illegal dismantling of USAID. Since the cuts to USAID, more than 8,200 people living in the DRC with HIV have lost access to life-saving treatment. Last year, there was a 62% increase in deaths due to cholera. And while there has been a surge in conflict-related sexual violence in eastern Congo, foreign assistance cuts have reduced the services available to survivors, including post-rape kits. And just in November, the World Food Program was forced to cut the number of people it assisted in DRC in half, from 1 million to 600,000 people. These cuts didn't make sense then, and they don't make sense now while the president speaks about the need for peace and saving lives in DRC. I, for one, would like to believe that the president's peace agenda is real and will result in real peace. But it's hard to believe when he has gutted our foreign policy tools and neglected to dedicate the necessary senior staff and resources to make peace not just possible, but enduring. Meanwhile, the Congolese have not seen peace. They've only seen escalation over the past year, and they don't have time to wait. We need immediate action to hold the M23 and Rwanda accountable for their occupation in the DRC and latest offensive in Uvira. We need immediate action to get the peace process back on track. And we need the administration to invest in its own institutions and tools so this process is successful. The Congolese people have endured violence, exploitation, and promises of peace for long enough. It is cruel to call the war in DRC over while the M23 was executing people over the holidays. It is time for the United States, along with the international community, to recommit to this peace process and demonstrate seriousness about holding spoilers to peace accountable. So I look forward to hearing from Deputy Assistant Secretary Troutman on the State Department's plan to fulfill the president's goal to actually find peace in the DRC. Thank you, Chairman Smith. I yield back.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson?
Witness introduction.
You?
Witness introduction.
I know. You want to say a few words?
Make a statement first.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta wait till my question.
You sure? Okay. Okay. Let me introduce our very distinguished witness, someone we know so well on this committee, Sarah Troutman, who serves as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of African Affairs and coordinating the administration's policy priorities in the Central African countries. She comes directly from serving as a senior advisor in the Bureau of African Affairs. Previously, she was director of the government relations at the One Campaign, where she advanced self-sustaining economic growth in African countries. She also served on the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee, sitting right back here all the time, for 5 years under Chairman Michael McCall, most recently as the professional staff member, and did a wonderful job. She received her BA in History and French and subsequently earned an MA in Violence, Terrorism, and Security from Queen's College in Belfast, Northern Ireland, an area that has known its, unfortunately, disproportionate share of violence itself over the many decades. We did have a staff member briefing yesterday, a closed briefing, in the SCIF with Mr. Bulus, who's spent as much time, it seemed, that we wanted to advance to ask him questions. He was very forthcoming, as were you, Sarah. But so much of what was said then cannot be replicated here. But I do believe that we're admonishing the administration, asking the administration to move quickly with sanctioning against certain individuals who are committing atrocities. And blowing up this plan, if that's what they are intending on doing. And I do think that will be forthcoming. So I just hope you could take that back on the record. That, we really want to see this work, and it works when people know that there might be a sword of Damocles hanging over their head. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the United States' efforts to advance peace between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, culminating in the signing of the Washington Accords on December 4th, 2025. As a former staffer of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I just want to say that I'm especially honored to be at this table today. For more than 3 decades, the Eastern DRC has been plagued by conflict, instability, and human suffering. The region's challenges have defied easy solutions, with cycles of violence undermining development and threatening the security of millions. The United States has long recognized the strategic importance of the Great Lakes region, both for our own interests and for the well-being of the region's people. On December 4th, at the Donald J. Trump Institute for Peace, President Tshisekedi and President Kagame signed the Washington Accords, a historic step forward that marks the most meaningful advance toward resolving this conflict in decades. This achievement is a testament to the power of sustained high-level diplomacy and the importance of American leadership on the world stage. President Trump is the peace president, and the landmark breakthrough achieved by the Washington Accords would not have been possible without his leadership. His direct engagement, vision, and determination to see this conflict resolved were instrumental in bringing the parties to the table and sustaining momentum throughout the process. I also recognize the leadership of Secretary Rubio and Senior Advisor Masad Boulos, whose tireless efforts were critical in forging consensus and guiding the negotiations to a successful conclusion. The benefits of the Washington Accords are profound. For the people of the DRC and of Rwanda, the Accords offer a pathway for lasting peace, improved security, and the opportunity to rebuild communities devastated by decades of violence. For the United States, President Trump designed the Accords to advance American interests in regional stability and promote economic growth that benefits both Americans and the region. As a key component of the America First foreign policy objectives of this administration, the Accords deliver direct, concrete benefits to the American people. By stabilizing a region that is a major source of critical minerals, including cobalt and coltan, which are essential for the U.S. manufacturing and defense sectors, the Accords help secure American supply chains and reduce our reliance on competitors like China. The Strategic Partnership Agreement with the DRC is a first-of-its-kind, legally binding agreement that creates the conditions for significant U.S. investment into the DRC in critical minerals and key strategic infrastructure, and lays out the path forward for U.S.-DRC cooperation on the Sakania-Lobito corridor. A more stable Great Lakes region means less need for costly U.S. humanitarian interventions and peacekeeping missions, allowing us to focus taxpayer resources on priorities at home while upholding U.S. global leadership and securing supply chains. For the region, the Washington Accords represent a new chapter. The Accords establish clear commitments from both sides to respect territorial integrity, cease support for armed groups, and cooperate on border security and economic development. The Accords also envision a robust framework for monitoring and implementation, with the United States, Qatar, and the African Union working together to play a central role in future mediation and oversight. We know that peace is fragile, and our work does not end with the signing of the Accords. As we move forward, our focus remains on the difficult work of implementation. We are working closely with our partners in the African Union, the United Nations, Qatar, and other regional and international stakeholders to ensure that commitments are translated into concrete action on the ground. This includes supporting the Qatari-led talks between the DRC and the M23 armed group, strengthening the AU's mediation architecture, and mobilizing resources for post-conflict recovery while burden sharing with partners. We will ensure that the promises made in Washington are kept, that the peace process delivers real results so that the people of the region see tangible improvements in their lives, and that the conditions for increased U.S. investment are realized. Transparency and accountability are central at every stage, and those who threaten peace will be held responsible. As Secretary Rubio said, we will take action to ensure promises made to the President are kept. In closing, I want to thank the subcommittee for its attention to this critical issue and for its support of our efforts in the Great Lakes region. The Washington Accords are a historic achievement, but they are also a call to action. With continued leadership and partnership, we can help build a future of peace and prosperity for the DRC, Rwanda, and the United States. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, but more importantly, for your leadership on a day-to-day level on this critical issue. MONUSCO has been reauthorized at 11,000 troops and personnel. And, you know, when I have visited with those troops in the past, especially when, unfortunately, there were some significant allegations being made against them, I got the sense that how often do they leave the barracks to actually try to mitigate the hostilities? And I'm wondering if you know, you have some thoughts on how they could be more effective. Are they effective now? It seems like there's still bloodletting going on in a very, very real way. I remember visiting a Christian health facility in DR Congo, near Goma, where many women who had been horrifically gang raped as a tool of terrorism, broken lives, were actually getting their lives back through faith and a great deal of health care and the like at that facility. And I was just amazed by how they had hope again, because you know, I could see some of the women who were coming in had no hope, but because of the love that was being shown to them. There's a lot of faith-based concern, obviously, for and other concern for those victims, and I'm wondering what we could be doing further to assist them. But in terms of the agreement, and I said it a moment ago, I do hope that there will be, I mean, there needs to be, you could ramp up or just say, look, we're not kidding. I think anybody can question the president's faithfulness on this. He really wants this. You all did unbelievably good hard work in devising all of these interlocking strategies. That's real commitment, and that's real hard work, and you've done it. And you know, when one or both or some of the parties don't respect that, you shouldn't blame the person who convened them and brought everybody into that multiple rooms, multiple times to try to hatch out a deal. So but I do hope that there will be a real hard hit on those who are fomenting the end of this agreement by allowing M23, for example, to commit the atrocities that they're committed. I'm wondering, too, if I could ask, just jot it down, is the AU playing a robust role in this? You know, they do have great diplomatic capabilities. And again, the UN has its presence there in a number of ways, including with peacekeepers. And I just hope that they're doing their job to protect innocent civilians.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for those questions. To start with addressing MONUSCO,
Yes.
we do assess that MONUSCO is currently the only force deployed in Eastern DRC that has the capacity to support these agreements that we have signed. So we are looking to MONUSCO to provide logistical support to the ceasefire monitoring mechanism that we are standing up in coordination with the International Conference of the Great Lakes region with their mechanism. So we are discussing how MONUSCO can be more helpful in holding up the accords specifically and also the Doha Framework Agreement. In the most recent mandate renewal, we were pleased to see language in MONUSCO's mandate that explicitly allows them to support these agreements. And Secretary Rubio did fund MONUSCO in the most recent funding obligation. So the U.S. does remain committed to supporting MONUSCO and to allowing it to play a more effective role in Eastern DRC. With that said, we do see significant obstruction to MONUSCO's capabilities. We see M23 obstructing MONUSCO's movements and capability to protect civilians. So that's something we continue to push on. We, of course, would like to see MONUSCO be more effective, especially in the protection of civilians. So we will continue to discuss the force's role. In terms of implementing the accords, as you mentioned, we fully intend to hold accountable any spoilers to the peace process. We, of course, appreciated President Trump's personal involvement in the December 4th signing of the accords. The president is rightly proud of the progress that we have made under his leadership over the past year in bringing an end to this conflict. And with that recognized, we know that peace is complicated, and Secretary Rubio immediately after the signing said, we have an agreement, and now the agreement has to be lived up to. So really putting the onus on the parties, as you said, to uphold their commitments. And he also said that, like any conflict, there are going to be ups and downs in that implementation, but he made it clear, and I also want to make clear today, that we will stay the course, and the U.S. remains absolutely committed to moving forward under the framework of the Washington Accords as the best way to resolve this conflict. We do intend to keep all options on the table to hold spoilers accountable. I also want to be clear that since December 4th, unfortunately, we have seen violence in Eastern DRC intensify. We saw M23 with support from the Rwandan Defense Forces that has been documented and stated by Ambassador Waltz, most recently at USUN. We saw this offensive take the strategically important town of Uvira, and that's extremely concerning to us. And we do consider that even though we have seen a measure of withdrawal from Uvira, I want to be clear that that movement is not enough. We have made it very clear that a more clear withdrawal further north, with Rwandan troops heading back toward Rwanda's borders, with M23 pulling back much farther to at least their previous lines and recommitting to their engagement in the Doha process. We really need to see these steps, and any measures we take to address them will be calibrated to change behavior. So we do have all options on the table, and at the highest level continue to discuss what measures we will implement to change the behavior that we're seeing. Finally, on the African Union's role, we are very appreciative of the AU, especially the AU Commission chairperson and his team. They have been very excellent in supporting both the Doha track and the Washington Accords implementation mechanisms. We do have AU representation in our Joint Oversight Committee and Joint Security Coordination Committee or mechanism meetings. The JOC and JSCM are the main accountability mechanisms through which we oversee the Washington track, and the AU is present there and very active, and we appreciate their input. The president of Togo is also designated as the AU mediator for this conflict. We appreciate the conference that he convened actually last weekend in Togo. The U.S. was able to participate, as were many others, and in that conference, a do-out that we had hoped to see, and which we believe we did see, was the operationalization of the 5 former heads of state that the AU has designated to help with certain tracks of this process. And one of those tracks is civil society engagement. So completely agree with what we're hearing, that civil society engagement is key to a lasting peace, and we're really hoping that the AU can step up and play a leading role in that respect. Thank
Before
you.
yielding to the ranking member, we have an obligation to do things too in the House and the Senate. We thank you for what you are doing. I know it's got to be terribly distressing to see all the hard work being put at risk. I'm thinking, Global Magnitsky Act, guess who pushed it? Me. It came from the original Belarus Democracy Act, which I did in 2004, when all these people said, oh, don't do that, don't sanction Lukashenko. Well, we did. That law was signed by George W. Bush in 2004, and we got a lot of prisoners out, and we said, we're not kidding. You're not going to be able to do business here. And that's the underpinning of the entire Global Magnitsky Act. It came from the Belarus Democracy Act. And I will look to do specific, country-specific legislation to help the president get adherence to, and these countries, because he's already doing it, to what they've agreed to. And again, I can't say it enough. When you sign something, you put your honor on the line, and then you do nothing, or you wink and nod and you allow certain things to happen. I'm talking about individual players in the 2 countries, particularly M23. We have to get more involved too as a Congress, and I plan to lead it. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dash Troutman, thank you again. While I appreciate President Trump's attention to this war, I think there is a long way to go before peace is actually realized in Eastern Congo. Even after the signing of the Washington Accords last month, the M23 and Rwanda Defense Forces took over Uvira in its 3rd new offensive in the Kivus in 2025. So while I was glad to see Secretary Rubio's and Ambassador Waltz's tough messages towards Rwanda, including that they will use tools at their disposal to hold Rwanda accountable, we have yet to see any of those tools deployed nearly a month later. What punitive measures, including sanctions, is the U.S. prepared to take against Rwanda and the M23 to force their full retreat to 75 kilometers from Uvira that the United States has pushed for, and to hold them accountable for violating the Washington Accords?
Thank you, Ranking Member, for the opportunity to address that. As I mentioned, we continue to hold all options on the table to incentivize changed behavior and incentivize Rwanda to comply with its obligations under the Washington Accords. We continue to believe that the Washington Accords are viable and that once we return to a state of compliance, we can continue with our oversight of that process.
Is there a timeline we can expect actual concrete consequences to be rolled out?
Sure. So we continue to discuss at the highest levels which consequences might be levied. I will say that we have been very clear that this issue does affect all aspects of our bilateral relationship. We would be much farther along in implementing our bilateral economic MOU and other bilateral agreements and arrangements with Rwanda were it not for this grave miscalculation. So we will continue to put pressure through all avenues.
Okay, but you can't give me an actual timeline of when we will see actual consequences?
Those decisions are above my pay grade, but we do continue to discuss.
All right. And as you know, the FARDC and Wazalendo forces have moved into Uvira. How is the U.S. engaging with the Congolese government to ensure a return of the civil administration to the city rather than military governance?
Thank you for your attention to the situation in Uvira. We have seen FARDC forces move back into the city and gradually reassert control. First and foremost, we messaged that there is a strong need to protect civilians, and we were very concerned about the continued dangers that civilians might face. So we did make that clear to the DRC government, and we continue to discuss local governance issues with them in all parts of Eastern DRC.
Okay, but we don't have a timeline yet on when we'll get to a civil administration of the city?
Since we're still assessing the situation in the city and where M23 has actually withdrawn to and how much control the FARDC have over the city, we're still in those discussions.
All right. And then my office is receiving reports of abductions and reprisal attacks against the Banyamulenge in Uvira by the Wazalendo and other unidentified armed elements. What steps is the U.S. taking to mitigate civilian protection risks to residents of conflict-affected communities in and around Uvira?
Thank you for that question. We remain very engaged with the DRC government in emphasizing the importance of protecting civilians and using channels of communication with other groups, including Wazalendo, to emphasize that reprisals cannot be seen in these communities. I think this is a good time to also bring up the humanitarian access issue. Unfortunately, we continue to see obstruction of humanitarian efforts really by all sides, and that really affects the reporting that we're able to get on the situation on the ground, and of course it affects the assistance that the communities in need are able to receive. So we continue to push all sides to allow unfettered humanitarian access to these areas.
All right. I want to turn now to the importance of civil society. I appreciate that you acknowledged how important they are. I'm glad to hear that the plan is to have the AU do some consultations. But, what is your response to criticism from Congolese opposition and civil society figures, including Nobel laureate Denis Mukwege, that the U.S.-backed peace process has effectively rewarded Rwanda with pledges of U.S. investment for attacking DRC?
Thank you for that. So we do continue to engage civil society, especially at our embassy level. Our embassies are quite engaged with local groups, especially in designing the regional economic integration framework. They were consulting a variety of groups in developing that key economic aspect of these agreements. And again, we do look to the African Union to play an integral role in bringing civil society voices to the forefront in implementation. We know that's critical to a sustainable peace, and we really hope that that will be one of the deliverables that the AU is able to step in on. I think that's what I would say for now.
Okay. Well, I think most of the civil society that I've spoken to would disagree with the assessment that they have been engaged in this process. So I would urge you to rectify that situation, because the Congolese have, been privy to 3 decades of failed peace agreements, and I think those civil society groups on the ground know what's needed to actually be able to make this durable. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing today, and thank you to our witness for being here. Appreciate your testimony. I've had the privilege of visiting the African continent on multiple congressional delegations since I've been in Congress my time here, including recently DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda in the area. During these visits, nearly all of my conversations have centered around security and economic growth. And thanks to the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Rubio, that's exactly what the Washington Accords, peace and prosperity, sets the foundation for this to take place in the DRC. Now that the agreement is signed, the implementation must be executed thoughtfully and with buy-in from all of our regional partners. Key to lasting peace is economic security, right? But you can't have economic security until you have some level of physical security as well, because people, outside nations are not going to come in and invest in an area where it's too hostile and too dangerous to operate. So that's just really going to be key in all of this. A plan that I've discussed with multiple heads of state in the area, including Rwanda and DRC, is that the region could create an economic framework where neighboring countries would manage separate segments of the critical mineral supply chain coming from the eastern DRC. Now, I'm not suggesting that the DRC should give resources away. They belong to the DRC. But what I am suggesting is that if this becomes a situation where it's mutually beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region because it's financially beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region, then I think that goes a long ways toward establishing lasting peace. And I've proposed multiple times that there should be agreement between the countries, and not just Rwanda and the DRC, but the DRC and Burundi, the DRC and Uganda, some of their neighbors, that everyone benefits from the trillions, the tens of trillions of dollars of rare earths that are currently in the Eastern DRC. It's one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, in the world with regards to some of these natural resources. So, if these could be mined, in the DRC and then refined or processed in the neighboring countries, everyone would have a vested interest in making sure that peace is maintained in the area. I also think that another area that's big here is that in order to get the physical security that we talked about, first off, let me just say that once that happens, another area that I've stressed really strongly is that the resources that come from this agreement down the road, if this were to take place, and some of this tremendous wealth were realized by the DRC and its neighboring countries, as I described, I think that it's absolutely critical that these resources have to be reinvested in the people of the DRC, the infrastructure. They have to see their lives getting better based on these minerals, being processed and sold. I also think that it's going to be really key. We talked about the atrocities, and yes, there's been atrocities on both sides. I've read the intel. M23, Wazalando. There's been some atrocities across the board. It's been going on for a long time now, right? But I also maintain that M23 is an armed militia group. I don't think they're going to put their weapons down and start farming the next day. I think that there has to be a concerted effort by the DRC to take the Congolese members of the M23 and incorporate them into the broader security platform for the country. Whether that's enabling them to be part of the military in some way, I'm not sure, but I do think that you have to have a plan for that as well. But my question for you, real quick, because I don't have much time left, I'm sorry, but is what is the Department of State doing right now to how are they working to implement such a framework that I was just described with regards to the economic and the physical security?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Congressman, for the opportunity to address that. The regional framework that you've described is exactly in line with what we have achieved with the Regional Economic Integration Framework signed between DRC and Rwanda. So that was a big incentive to participate in the peace process. Like you said, economic security and physical security do go together, and we won't have increased investment until we do have peace. So we are looking forward to helping the DRC and Rwanda implement the REEF, the Regional Economic Integration Framework, which seeks to strengthen cross-border collaboration on sectors like critical minerals, also energy, infrastructure, tourism, and public health. So we look forward to the implementation of that framework, especially once we make more progress toward real stability on the ground. And I do appreciate your note that we should be looking at Uganda and Burundi for inclusion in certain efforts related to that framework. I think we are certainly hoping to get to that stage, and I would love to discuss with you further what that might look like to ensure that all countries in the region do benefit from this deal that was signed between the DRC and Rwanda. If I could just address the comment you made about M23 and the reintegration and DDR efforts, that's a critical aspect of the Doha track and something that will be discussed in further negotiations. So we are very supportive of Qatar's efforts to convene those discussions, and the U.S. will continue to provide technical support as we move through those negotiations. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having more conversations with you and your team about how we can support investment in the DRC and the region.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know this, I'm making it sound a lot easier than it actually is. There's been, this has been going on for decades now, this conflict. And but I do think that at some point there have to set aside differences, and there has to be a way for M23 to reintegrate and for everyone, including both sides of this conflict, to see that they are benefiting from what's going on with the vast mineral wealth there that I think is ultimately the solution to this problem. But once again, I thank you for your time, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. For decades, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, has been trapped in a cycle of violence due to ethnic conflict between government actors, a variety of rebel groups, and foreign actors. Today, almost 15 million people in the DRC need humanitarian assistance, and almost 27 million people will face crisis or emergency levels of food insecurity in 2026. In December, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Paul Kagame officially signed the U.S. brokered peace agreement and economic framework. The sustainability of this agreement is questionable given that it prioritized economic benefit from extraction of critical minerals over building sustainable peace, excluded key actors impacted by the conflict, especially local civil society and Congolese women and girls, did not get involved in the influential destabilizing actors and parties to the conflict, such as the March 23rd movement, the M23. Over the last year, the administration terminated conflict and atrocity prevention and resolution programs in the country that advanced livelihoods and promoted stability around critical minerals, which has in turn undermined stability and threatened the success of the U.S.-led peace efforts. Furthermore, the reorganization of the State Department resulted in the elimination of key offices focused on conflict and atrocity prevention, such as the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operation, CSO, and the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues. To successfully and sustainably address the drivers of violence and instability in the DRC, the Trump administration must support programs and incorporate diverse local stakeholders, strengthen capacity to prevent and resolve conflict, respond to atrocities, and tackle the disproportionate impact the long-running conflict has had on women and girls. On another note, I'd like to add the Trump administration is wrong for eliminating programs that have to deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the on-ramp to help resolve issues of conflict, as well as bring about racial justice, as well as promote women to inclusive leadership positions. I would ask you, to what extent has the African Affairs Bureau implemented conflict prevention and peace-building programs in the country to complement recent diplomacy surrounding DRC?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. I would note that we do have many ongoing assistance programs, mostly with life-saving assistance being implemented in the DRC. Secretary Rubio has been clear that we will remain the largest donor of life-saving humanitarian assistance in the world, and we will use foreign assistance to support our strategic priorities. The DRC clearly is a strategic priority, and bringing stability and peace to the region is obviously a focus for President Trump. So we look forward to continuing those assistance programs. I would add that we continue to implement programs, including those which offer protection and medical services to women and girls, and other programs that focus on protecting vulnerable populations. So absolutely recognize that women and girls are under extreme threat in the eastern DRC, and we will continue those protection efforts.
Is there any particular reason why the U.S.-backed peace plan was not inclusive, as civil society, including women-led civil society, was not included in official talks?
Thank you so much for the chance to address that. So we did include civil society in consultations, especially around the regional economic integration framework, and we look forward to those conversations ongoing as we look at how to implement the framework and encourage investment in the region. And we are looking to the African Union to really step up in this lane and bring civil society voices to the forefront as they help us with the implementation of these agreements. So we look forward to speaking with those groups, especially in coordination with the AU.
And as we speak in closing, I find it rather curious that the President of the United States puts more bans on African countries, more bans on integrating Africa into the global economy, making more barriers between our great countries to participate. I thank you so much for your cooperation, participation. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Olszewski?
Thank you to Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs for holding this hearing. Thank you to our witness for being here. Just a little bit of context for Congolese civilians living in the DRC. The real test of the Washington Accords is pretty simple. It's not whether the president declares there is peace. It's does life become safer, more dignified, and more economically secure in local communities. Today, more than 70% of Congolese civilians live in extreme poverty. More than 1,100 schools and learning sites have been damaged or turned into shelters, with over 1.6 million children out of school in all of eastern DRC. Nearly 25 million are facing high levels of acute food insecurity. And since December 1st, at least 500,000 people, including over 100,000 children, have been newly displaced within South Kivu. So I just want to echo, I guess, the questions and the concerns, because despite these staggering numbers, we continue to hear from Congolese civil society leaders that they have been sidelined in the negotiations. And so it's not a specific question, but hopefully as a follow-up, Ms. Troutman, I'd love to learn more about specifically, now you say that they're being engaged. I want to hear specifically as a follow-up how that engagement has happened and what the plans are to continue, but I appreciate your commitment to that. I have a couple of questions I do want to get to while we're here today, and really grounded in the belief that policy should be grounded in the lived realities, the priorities, and the leadership of the Congolese communities themselves. Without it, we risk repeating the same top-down approach that has failed the Congolese people for 3 decades, no matter how strong the diplomatic support looks like from here in Washington. So my first question today is actually building on the local mining question. We know that the Strategic Partnership Agreement includes few requirements for local processing, environmental standards, and revenue sharing. I'm curious how the State Department will work to ensure that the wealth generated and produced by these resources or U.S.-backed firms will actually help drive local economic growth.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for the opportunity to address that question. We do want to be clear in our messaging that the U.S.-DRC Strategic Partnership Agreement is a big win for Americans and for the United States. It's also a big win for the DRC and the Congolese people. We worked very closely in coordination with President Tshisekedi and his government to develop this deal, and we are very excited about the implications it holds for the DRC's future. We do believe that under the deal, more U.S. companies will have access to investment opportunities in the DRC. We know that U.S. companies bring with them the highest operating standards worldwide, which will help with local skills transfer, local job creation, and develop more economic opportunities across the DRC. And we look forward to seeing those actualized as we implement the agreement. The agreement also includes commitments from the DRC to regulate and formalize the mining sector. So that will help formalize artisanal mining especially, which will help combat exploitation and abuse of local workers, and to help the DRC people benefit from revenue streams from their resources. So
do you all plan to be engaged in those conversations as they're producing that regulation?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then secondly, on child soldiers, we know that UNICEF reports that the recruitment and use of children by armed groups has increased by 60% in 2024 compared to the previous year. Additionally, the control of vast areas by armed groups in the eastern provinces of the DRC has entrenched instability, exacerbating the suffering of civilians. I'm curious how the U.S. government is supporting both country-led and partner efforts, including from agencies such as UNICEF, to stem the recruitment of children who would perpetuate this conflict and ensure even greater opportunity for those children. What active awards does the department have in the DRC that's working to address the needs of these vulnerable children?
Thank you so much for the chance to address that issue. So I would say we continue to raise the issue of child soldiers at the highest levels in our cooperation with the DRC government. Regulations related to the use of child soldiers obviously prevent a significant amount of security cooperation with countries that have been deemed to have this issue. So in signing the bilateral U.S.-DRC security memorandum of understanding that we established on December 4th as well, we've been clear that in order to implement, we do follow, obviously, U.S. regulations, and the use of child soldiers continues to be of grave concern to us within DRC territory. So we will continue to work on that issue. And in terms of active awards, I can get back to you on specifics, but we do have awards that address the protection of children and vulnerable communities. So we do think that through providing these resources, hopefully children will have alternatives to joining these types of groups.
That'd be great. I look forward to that. Thank you for your time. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
I'd like to recognize Ms. Cherfilis McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much, Ms. Troutman, for being here today to answer our questions. My constituents have vocalized their desire to do more work with Africa, especially when it comes to business. So when this agreement came to fruition, many people were excited about the opportunities. Florida is a global trade gateway, home to major ports and logistic hubs, and increasingly connected U.S. markets to Africa. Stability between the DRC and Rwanda is essential for secure supply chain, responsible mining, material sourcing, and expanded two-way trade that benefits American workers and businesses. As Congress looks at President Trump's Washington Accords, it's important to assess how U.S. engagement can reinforce African-led peace efforts while also supporting economic integration and long-term regional stability. How is the United States working with Rwanda and DRC to advance cross-border trade, infrastructure, and material supply chains in ways that support peace and deliver measurable economic benefits?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for the chance to answer that question. The U.S. stands ready to help the DRC and Rwanda implement the regional economic integration framework that I mentioned. So the goal of this framework is to incentivize peace and stability by providing opportunities for the DRC and Rwanda to cooperate on cross-border projects. And we certainly are encouraging U.S. companies to invest in these projects, and we hope to highlight certain efforts that they might want to get involved in as this year progresses. We also hope that we can attract financing, possibly from our tools like DFC and EXIM, to support projects like this that will enforce stability and really bring economic opportunities to the region. I will say that we continue to emphasize that peace and stability is necessary for the DRC and Rwanda to take full advantage of the regional economic integration framework. So we do look forward to supporting and promoting these opportunities, but we do need to see compliance with the peace agreement first.
So do you have any specific incentives that you'll be using, mechanisms to support and encourage people to do business?
Sure. So we are committed to highlighting opportunities in the countries of the Great Lakes region and attracting U.S. support and investment. This could include events hosted in D.C. to connect U.S. companies and advertise these opportunities also to the DFC and EXIM, our financing tools, and connect them with representatives of host governments to advertise these opportunities. So that's something we'll continue to work on as the year progresses, and I would welcome any recommendations you might have from companies that are headquartered in your district.
And what do you believe is a realistic timeline for us to see this come into fruition?
We certainly hope to see progress this year. We are moving forward on implementing the U.S. DRC Strategic Partnership Agreement already. We hope to have the first meeting of the Joint Steering Committee soon, which will discuss opportunities specifically in the DRC that U.S. companies might be able to invest in, and we certainly hope to host an event convening companies and governments to discuss opportunities under the Regional Economic Integration Framework. So certainly hope to see progress this year.
Wonderful. And what did the African Union facilitate, the talks that were happening in Togo? What did it realistically achieve?
Sure. So we're very grateful for the African Union's commitment to supporting the peace process. We were very grateful for their explicit support of the Washington Accords and also the Doha Framework Agreement. We think that their support underpinning both of these processes is absolutely crucial. The AU has operationalized 5 former heads of state to take leadership on certain aspects of the peace process. So as I mentioned, we certainly hope that this conference strengthened their mandate so that they can move out on efforts to incorporate more civil society voices, to elevate humanitarian issues, to help with an inter-Congolese national dialogue and things like that. So we certainly hope to see their mandate strengthened as we move forward this year.
So my last question, because we're extremely committed to the success of this accord, it's extremely important that Rwanda and DRC are successful, but also that our businesses can attach and be productive. So what do you need from Congress to give you the scaffolding for success?
Thank you very much for that support. I would say we welcome your ideas and your thoughts on which companies might be a good fit for investment under these frameworks. We certainly welcome that feedback, and especially as we do hopefully hold events in Washington, we would welcome participation. So I'll certainly keep in touch with your staff on future
Now, are you only
opportunities.
having events in DC? Because if you can come into Florida, we have great weather to have events. If we can lure you now. San Diego's very nice also, but you want to come to Florida. We would love to host events. We've been doing a lot of events, doing business with Africa, and people love it. So whatever we can do to help support and move this initiative forward, we would love to do. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Just a few follow-up questions, and I'll yield to my ranking member, and I think Dr. Jackson had a question or two. I've read both of the statements that have been submitted by the respective countries. They're very, very good and comprehensive. They both start out from the onset, the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, extends its deep thanks to the United States of America and President Donald Trump for facilitating the December 25th Peace and Prosperity Agreement. For the first time in history, they write, a U.S. president has taken a personal interest in ending Rwandan-backed aggression in the war in eastern DRC. Without objection, that full statement will be made a part of the record. And then the Rwandans, through their distinguished ambassador, write, Rwanda extends its profound gratitude to President Trump and his administration for prioritizing the Rwanda-DRC peace process, and then points out that the accords represent serious progress towards permanent stability, security, prosperity in the Great Lake regions. And they thank everyone from Secretary Rubio, starting with President Trump, Vance, Masoud Bulus, and others for making this possible. Again, beautiful statements in large part. We're asking that they just implement them, be true to your word. And let me just ask you, if I could, the church groups, and I meet with the church groups all the time, both countries. Senko, I've met with them for decades. They, there's a great deal of faith in each of these countries, people who really do believe in God, and they do believe in the power of forgiveness and mercy and reconciliation, maybe most of all, reconciliation, because that's needed more than anything else. I wonder how well we are working with them to try to get them, the church groups, to do more. I remember meeting many times with Rick Warren from the Saddleback Church, who had a very strong personal relationship with Kagame. And Jim Inhofe, the senator, he used to tell me how he would pray with President Kagame. We sometimes disagreed, but I would say, peace, just tell him there's more that could be done. And the onus does lie with him and the other president, Takashedi, to do more. And I'm wondering, if others, Senator Rounds, I know, has a good, robust relationship with Paul Kagame. I think the more people who are raising the issue that they listen to, maybe they listen to our subcommittee, maybe not. Maybe they listen to me or my good friend, Ms. Jacobs, but we're not going to go away, and they won't go away. They may have a particular influence on saying, let's end the hostilities and end the atrocities, and it can happen. I can't thank you enough for your leadership, and again, the president, as it's noted in this one statement from DR Congo, first president. I remember arguing with the Clinton administration repeatedly about how they missed it on the atrocities being committed with the genocide. And then even after it was all over, so-called, there were people following people into the bush to kill them. We had very, very good witnesses come in and tell us how Refugees International, for example, it's not over. They're hunting people down still. Why is Washington turning the page? So I don't think the page at all will be turned here and until there is peace. And then we need to sustain that peace and that prosperity as best we can. So, and I'm wondering, we know that both sides agree that the FDLR is a problem. Who benefits from the status quo? Maybe you could speak to that. And again, I can't ask enough that the faith community. I remember having meetings in South Sudan repeatedly with the president there about how it was excluding the church, and they had all these ideas on how they could promote peace and reconciliation, and they had an arm's length approach with Salva Kiir, or he had it with them. I said, please, Mr. President, you have an asset here in the church community that is second to none. They love people, even those who persecute them. Why not utilize their good offices? So I hope that that's being done very robustly. Bring them into that. I know you are, but whatever more could be done, and get more of our members of Congress who have these personal relationships with people like Kagame to do more. And so if you could speak to that, then I'll yield to my ranking member and to Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're absolutely right. We greatly appreciate your efforts and the efforts of everyone who has contacts with both DRC and Rwandan representatives to please echo the call for implementation of the Washington Accords. That's the most important thing we can do, is to continue to draw attention to the promises that were made to President Trump and enforce the importance of implementation. So I would say your point on faith-based groups, we of course recognize and appreciate the important role that faith organizations play in both the DRC and Rwanda. I think that they will play a very important role in upcoming national dialogues, and we certainly hope that through the African Union's efforts especially, their voices can be incorporated along with civil society and political opposition to create a real, genuine conversation where we can discuss the governance issues that we hope to resolve, especially in Eastern DRC. And the governance issues will be obviously discussed in the Doha track as well in future negotiations. I would say also that faith-based groups are very important in our foreign assistance implementation. We obviously work very closely with several groups in the DRC and really appreciate their support as we continue to deliver this life-saving assistance. I would also say, to your point about the FDLR, the FDLR is a legitimate threat. We certainly are not denying that. They cannot be allowed to operate in Eastern DRC. So we are certainly emphasizing to the DRC government that neutralizing the FDLR, as they have committed under these agreements, is absolutely essential, and we need to see more steps taken to do that. Now, while the FDLR is a legitimate threat, we do not consider the advance that we have seen from M23 backed by the RDF to be targeted at really neutralizing the FDLR. It has gone beyond the areas where we would see that interaction. So we, while we recognize the importance of neutralizing the FDLR, we must say that that is more a matter of the DRC not fully implementing its obligations under the agreements, but this recent advance that we have seen with RDF involvement has been a breach of Rwanda's obligations. So there's a difference in how we're handling those two issues.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you. So I appreciate that civil society was consulted on the reef, but I think it's really important that they are actually included in the peace processes itself, and especially as the United States is making deals under the Strategic Partnership Agreement. The reef alone is not enough. Now I'd like to turn to the humanitarian crisis. In late December, the Trump administration announced a $2 billion commitment through the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, for humanitarian operations in 17 crisis-affected countries, including DRC. Ms. Troutman, given the crisis in DRC and President Trump's attention to the conflict, what portion of this OCHA funding will be used in DRC?
Thanks for the opportunity to discuss the OCHA mechanism. We're very excited about this new and innovative way to deliver foreign assistance. We think that under the OCHA mechanism, we'll be able to respond more flexibly to crises that arise around the world and be more strategic in how we are obligating foreign assistance through the pooled funding mechanisms. While we have seen the high-level obligation to OCHA from the U.S. government, I'm not aware that we've set country-specific levels. So I look forward to keeping in touch with your staff on that issue as we get more clarity.
Okay, and given the depth of need in DRC and other countries, does the administration anticipate or foresee making additional contributions this year?
I would say that the DRC certainly remains a strategic priority for U.S. assistance. We remain committed to supporting populations in need and understand that that underpins our economic and security priorities. So we certainly remain committed to providing assistance in the DRC.
Okay, so I guess you will tell me that you do not currently have the details to share what specific humanitarian programs, including funding levels, are ongoing in Eastern DRC right now?
So I'll say that we, over the past year, have provided $191 million in life-saving assistance in the DRC. That contribution makes the U.S. contributes 30% of the humanitarian response in DRC, according to those numbers. So
Can you send over the specific programs and dollar amounts?
we can get you more information on that.
Thank you. And then I also want to turn to peacekeeping. I know Chairman Smith asked a few questions, but as you know, the Trump administration cut FY25 funding for UN peacekeeping operations by nearly 50% in 2 rescissions packages. Because of these funding shortfalls, the UN has been forced to reduce troop levels for all UN missions, including MONUSCO, by 25%. The FY26 funding bill recently passed by the House would restore funding for UN peacekeeping operations. Given the importance of MONUSCO to stability in Eastern DRC, is the administration committed to providing full funding for the mission?
Thank you so much for the chance to address MONUSCO funding. As I mentioned, the Secretary did provide funding for MONUSCO this year, and we look forward to continuing.
Full funding?
We did fulfill the U.S. obligation, I believe, this past year, and we certainly remain committed to assessing the mission. As I mentioned, we're very excited that its new mandate provides specific support to the Washington Accords, and we look forward to supporting the mission being more targeted and strategic in how it advances that objective.
And are you committed to making sure that MONUSCO is not forced to continue operating with significantly reduced capacity?
We certainly remain committed to ensuring that MONUSCO can fulfill its mandate properly. We are very concerned, obviously, about the constraints that it faces in terms of access. Even if it was at full levels, the obstruction that we see is really unacceptable. So while we are supportive of its mandate, we recognize that it has not been able to fulfill it. So we are determining how we can best strategically support MONUSCO in fulfilling its mandate in whatever way we see best.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to make one more comment too. I think is important to just highlight is, I think the big winner in all of this, the entity that comes out on top is China, and I think this happens all over the world. As a matter of fact, and it happens a lot in Africa. That China thrives in this environment where there's a lack of physical security and there's a lot of corruption, and I think that describes Eastern DRC, for the last a few decades at least. But I think China's taken advantage of it, and I think they've taken advantage of the people in the DRC. And I just wanted to know, are we actively engaging with President Sheikh Hashedi and with the other government officials in Kinshasa about the problems with the Chinese? I would refer to it, I wrote it down here as strategic corruption, because they will promote this instability because it keeps their competitors, Western investment out of these areas. And so until we get past some of that, we need to do that. And I've talked to some American companies that were in the DRC that were subject to this, where they had regulatory burdens put on them. They had overwhelming, unreasonable taxation on their businesses. And some of it was being driven by relationships with the Chinese, with the government in Kinshasa, to promote some of that, to kind of eliminate them as competition. So I think many of my colleagues here have asked, how do we get some of these Western countries, the United States and some of our other allies, to come in and invest in the DRC and invest in become good business partners with the DRC. I think that until we address some of this stuff, it's also exceedingly difficult to do that. So have we had conversations about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman, for the chance to elaborate a bit more on the strategic partnership agreement that the U.S. made with the DRC, because it addresses all of these issues. So we know that Chinese companies have a vast majority of ownership over critical mineral assets in the DRC, especially copper and cobalt assets, and those are critical for U.S. supply chain security, especially important for our efforts to be dominant in emerging technology and to supply the defense industrial base. So part of the strategic partnership agreement agreement with the DRC is aimed at making sure that U.S. companies have preferential access to strategic assets in the DRC, which we will work with the DRC to designate. So the purpose of that is to get U.S. companies in the door, prevent Chinese companies from taking over more of these assets, and to make sure that the offtake is coming to the United States to reduce our reliance on the refined minerals coming from China. So certainly this agreement is aimed at reasserting U.S. dominance in the critical minerals sector, also making sure that the DRC is able to profit from its resources, because as you said, Chinese companies often have the lowest standards. They're exploiting the system, they're exploiting corruption, and we certainly don't want to see that. It's bad for U.S. companies trying to invest. It's bad for the people of the DRC. So we are looking forward to implementing this agreement to really cement the opportunities for U.S. companies in the DRC and in these critical mineral supply chains, and also to make sure that China's influence is reduced. And on the issue of corruption, part of the strategic partnership agreement also addresses regulatory issues, making sure that the DRC's mining sector is cleaned up so that U.S. companies can be more confident when they're investing, and that the regulations are easier to navigate. So all of this is aimed at the exact issue that you raised, and that we are very concerned with how embedded Chinese companies are in the DRC.
Well, thank you. And when I travel to anywhere in Africa, I make the point, anywhere in the world for that matter, because China, with their Belt and Roads program, is all over the place. But I make a point to everybody that the U.S. is a much better partner than the Chinese. We're there to, if we make agreements, regarding the natural resources, we're paying for them, and we're paying appropriately for them. We're not robbing these countries of some of their natural resources, which I think is what the Chinese do. But I do think that, like I said before, I think once we get in a situation where we start getting some investment in there, it has to stay in the Eastern DRC. The money does. The vast majority of it has to, people that live and work there, or that would like to work there but live there, have to see the infrastructure building up around this, and they have to see their lives getting better, or quite honestly, it's just not gonna survive long term. So with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Just on that point briefly, then we'll conclude the hearing. I've had 5 hearings on the issue of cobalt coming out of DR Congo. We've had numerous people, and Ed Royce, my friend and colleague, was very active in trying to promote the idea of, hey, child labor. 35,000 approximately children are being forced into these mines and dying, in some cases getting very sick, and about 200,000 adults who are under very coercive restraints by the Chinese Communist Party, who run these. And then where does the cobalt go? It goes to Xinjiang. I chair the China Commission. We've had hearings there too. Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs are being so horribly repressed and oppressed, and then it comes here. Now, if we're going to have cars that use cobalt, fine, but don't do it on the backs of children and forced labor. And so our bill, which again I hope is moot because of this agreement, would provide a rebuttable presumption that anything coming out of DRC that goes to China has been tainted with slave labor and child labor, and therefore is inadmissible to the United States. We got a major portion of it, like I said before, passed in the Ways and Means Committee. But if all this fails, we're right back to doing that. And we also have a strategy embedded in the bill, because we want the people in DR Congo to enjoy the fruits of all of that richness that they have, and let them be blessed with it, not the Chinese Communist Party that's using it to build out their military capabilities and to oppress maybe Taiwan next, certainly Hong Kong and their own people. So, this is so important that this prevail. And again, we want the people of DR Congo to benefit. Whether it be with a friendly African country or some other true democracy, that's where you do the processing. With safeguards that protect not just those who mine it, but those who process it later. You don't have that with China. It just doesn't exist under a dictatorship. So thank you. And I want to thank my friend and colleague for raising those kinds of important issues. I want to thank you, Secretary Troutman, for your valuable testimony, for your very clear and well-informed answers. And to the members of our committee, including our distinguished ranking member, Ms. Jacobs, for asking her good questions as well. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witness, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing if you would. Pursuant to committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to the length limitations, and without objection, the committee stands adjourned.